The serpent's words left a stillness in the gloom as the pair sat in uneasy silence. Immediately Drake suspected this request to be a trap, or perhaps a test, though he found it difficult to believe that Imrys would find any response he issued of interest. His mind raced, but Drake could not discover why such a majestic creature would wish for death, or what he hoped to gain by feigning such a petition. Fearing the wrath of the dragon, the boy meekly inquired, why? The dragon seemed to arch its brow as its penetrating gaze studied the boy, spurring him to speak once more, desperate not to offend the creature. You are the strongest thing I have ever seen. If there is the possibility of continuing your journey, why ask me to destroy you? Would that not be a shame and a blight to you? Aye, a shame and a blight it is, Imrys murmured. I pray that you in your travels will prove worthy of being my slayer, so when my brethren learn of my fate, my disgrace will not be magnified. However, your worth is not entered into my estimations. Little one, accursed am I, and long have I dwelled in darkness. Despair has ever been my companion throughout these long years. Even should I be released, free to roam the worlds once more, there would be no peace or contentment within me. This place corrodes and corrupts all. My flame has long since been extinguished. I am the living dead, in an unnatural state, a cursed visage. There is no hope for me, only pain. The dragon's voice snarled within the boy's mind. What sins I have committed have long since been atoned for. This turn in the conversation did not sit well with Drake. There was always a way, and there was always hope. There had to be, even in a place as terrible as this. He did not pretend to understand Imrys, or what he had lost within this mountain, but the thought of something so ancient being destroyed and so much knowledge being lost left him with a queasy feeling in the pit of his stomach. When he looked into Imrys' eyes, Drake could not find any answers. He could sense no suffering or weakness. The mere idea that there was no brightness in this creature's future was asinine. Drake knew that there were many lords and sages who would have fought and died for the chance to gain even the smallest portion of the dragon's power or knowledge. Perhaps despair was the true curse of this void. The dragon's eyes held their unyielding resolve, and Drake bowed his head. Even the wisest among his people would be scorned for questioning a creature such as Imrys. Who was he to contend with one so great in years? The chasm turned from oppressive to menacing as Drake came to terms with Imrys' request. He did not wish to linger any longer here than he had to, especially if even the dragon wished to escape it at the cost of its life. Imrys had made his decision. Now, Drake had to determine what lay ahead of him. He turned his focus on what the dragon's proposal would mean, pondering what the dragon's blessing would grant him. As magnanimous as such an offer was, its value was lost on the young thief. What earned his enthusiasm was the much more substantive offer the dragon had promised earlier, a way out of the chasm. The prospect of escape caused Drake's mind to race. He would be leagues from hospitable civilization, even if he emerged on the eastern side of the mountain ridge. He did not even wish to think of traversing the perils of the west, and quickly pushed such worries to the back of his mind. It was then that Drake knew that the dragon had chosen his words wisely. Imrys' handiwork held his hunger at bay, but once the dragon died, or when Drake journeyed out of its protection, he would be left destitute. He had already gone some time without food or water, and Drake did not know how long it would be till he saw the sun's light, or what awaited him once he emerged. As Drake pondered his predicament, he nodded slowly before looking into Imrys' fathomless eyes, staring coolly down at him. Clearing his throat, Drake pledged his service to Imrys. Though the dragon's visage remained unsearchable, there was a strange ripple in the air that felt much like relief. Imrys stretched himself to his full majesty, his eyes piercing the very darkness, surveying every crevice of the void. Finally, the voice of the dragon rumbled within Drake's mind distantly. The paths for one so small are few, but with my guidance, you will find your way to the sun's light. Go now, retrieve the blade, and let us both be rid of this accursed place. With these words, renewed vigor gave strength to Drake's limbs. To his eyes, the world lost its color. The scarlet vein's hue dimmed, till at last only the faintest vestiges of its true color remained. The eerie shadows that had clung to every jutting stone and vacuous depth were now vanquished, and all was laid bare under the pale gray light. The full majesty of this terrible and wondrous place was now revealed to Drake, though it was a muted and dull world to his eyes. There was not a vantage within the desolation that was hidden from him, but Drake's eyes were drawn to a shining spot leading deeper still within the abyss. Imri's voice echoed once more, "Let the light guide your path." Drake found his feet moving, though unsure if Imri's compelled him or if the energy he now brimmed with sped him on his newfound course. Either way, he zealously hurried toward the light and passed out of sight of the dragon into a rift within an otherwise solid wall of stone. No longer did he stumble over rock and stone, though the path lay in ruin. Crawling through cracks and chasms vast and deep, Drake coiled his way through fire-blasted stone and rubble that had remained untouched since the great battle Imris described. Heedless of all the wonders and perils to either side of him, the boy hurried onward. Had he attempted to navigate such terrain on his own, he would have been hopelessly lost, especially when the veins thinned and their light failed. However, his eyes were still filled with the same dismal light that had overcome him after he had accepted Imri's bargain. With the dragon's guidance, he was easily able to navigate the ruinous labyrinth. Time flowed strangely for Drake. His movements were sluggish, as if he were walking through water. Awashed in a strange, pale light, he moved through the dreamlike world, vividly aware of his surroundings. Yet his mind was clouded and could focus on nothing save the light guiding him through the ruins. At long last, the pale light of day appeared at the bottom of an enormous rock slide. Without a moment's delay, Drake scurried eagerly down the shifting ground, skidding over the ashy gravel. As he approached the edge of the stony ruins, the light grew, till he reached the ridge, and the pale reflection of true light turned into a blinding scar across the yawning void. Blinking back the dazzling rays of the sun, Drake stared out the wide gaping mouth of the cavern. Staggered, the young thief stood with hands outstretched and eyes clenched shut. Even still, his feet shuffled forward as the welcoming warmth of the sun's rays beckoned to him. As the light turned from brilliant glare to dismal wintry gray, Drake was temporarily roused from his tranced stupor, and he stared into an alien world, grateful to see anything other than the charred stone stained by the sickly scarlet hue of the dragon's lifeblood. The air was so clean and crisp, Drake eagerly filled his lungs with the earthy mountain air, reveling in the delightful sensation it brought. In the shadow of the cavern, Drake stared into a sea of green rising up the very ledge where he stood. Stepping out from under the shelter of the chasm's roof, a vast forest lay beneath his feet, their massive trunks rooted in the mountain slope far below. The boy marveled at the trees as he had never seen their like before, all standing tall against the mountain's summit, for as far as the eye could see. Though his eyes pained him, the sky was overcast and gloomy, as a front was rolling in from the north. A cool gust of icy wind assured him the storm would soon be upon the Barren Summit. The trees groaned as their mighty timbers wavered in a flurry that rippled through the eerie stillness of the ancient forest. This gust would have frozen Drake to the very bone, but much like his hunger, winter's embrace was dull and distant. Deliberately, Drake moved forward along the mouth of the cavern. The cold may not have fazed him, but being on the western side of the mountain ridge was enough cause for the young thief to hesitate. He could feel Imri's influence grappling to regain its hold over his mind, even if being outside the mountain had weakened the creature's influence on him. Though he could not see the blade, Drake knew precisely where it was, as the serpent's will urged him toward the sword. Still, the thief's caution won out against the dragon's distant call, and he proceeded with no small amount of trepidation along the ledge, eyeing the western wilds in awe and with an impending sense of dread. His eyes drifted to the lip of the cliff, overlooking the sparse trees sprawling up the rocky slope. At the edge of the precipice, a stone beam jutted from the ledge. On the tip of the formation, a ragged leather belt hung. Slowly, with no small amount of apprehension, Drake crept to the cliff's border. The boy felt exposed as he reached the edge, as if 1,000 eyes were upon him, questioning his intrusion into this strange land. However, all apprehension soon dissipated like a vapor in the wind. His breath caught in his throat when he laid eyes on a serpentine blade hanging precariously from the stone protruding from the mountain's ledge. Its sheath, worn and rotten, hung from a leather belt so threadbare that Drake feared should he touch anything but the weapon itself, he would risk it falling to the foot of the mountain. The blade shone brighter than gold, with a silver gleam that bore no sign of tarnish or wear. Indeed, the sword was the most magnificent piece of metalwork Drake had ever appraised. His hand quivered with anticipation, as he could hardly wait to examine it more closely. Taking a deep breath and releasing it, the young thief steadied his heart. His eyes rested and then narrowed on his prize, vanquishing all thoughts of the dragon and the foreign wilds. Gingerly, Drake knelt beside the protruding stone. Leaning down, he stretched his body to its full length and fell short of his mark. So he inched his body further onto the narrow stone, and again he uncoiled his limbs, his hand nearing the hilt. As he reached his limit, Drake felt his focus waver. He was so close, yet he needed more distance. Adjusting his grip so that he could stretch further still, his eyes darting between his target and the mountain slope as he reached for the sword's hilt. When a gust of wind rocked his balance, Drake's outstretched hand brushed against the guard. The threadbare leather faltered and snapped, but the young thief stabilized himself, and his fingertips grasped the pommel's swell deftly. His heart raced as he stared down into the rocky crags below. Cautiously, Drake shifted his body back onto the jutting stone. He gave himself a moment to gather his wits about him. Casting a quick glance at his prize, he breathed a sigh of relief, and a soft chuckle escaped his lips. His heart still racing, he crept backward, off the protrusion and onto the cliff's edge, before shuffling deeper within the cavern, quite eager to be away from the ledge. Leering at the crest, Drake rested against the faint warmth of the chasm's stones, widening the rush from his maneuver. However, even now, he was offered no peace as the dragon's call urged his speedy return, and the eerie tranquility of the forest haunted the recesses of his mind. As his breathing steadied and his heart rate began to normalize, the boy's fingers were already subconsciously investigating his prize, tracing the hilt's simple yet ornate decor. Drake slowly turned his eye toward the sword. His gaze immediately fell to the rippling blade and its depths. Within, he found strange markings that he took to be runes or words of some kind. A cool pale light, like that of the stars, dimly shone from the sword, silhouetting the edges of the blade. Currents within the silver blade cast strange hues, like that of pearls. The metal of the callus was foreign to Drake, resembling silver, yet he knew it to be made of sturdier stuff. The instrument had an enchanting element about it, which caused the young thief to lose himself within its depths. There was a quaint, otherworldly quality to the mysterious weapon, which brought a strange peace to the boy. Begrudgingly, he tore his gaze from the blade and began to study the weapon's features in earnest. The pommel was a thick disc, one side displaying a council of men whose eyes were inlaid with the daintiest pale jewels Drake had ever seen. On the other side, unlike the rest of the sword, the pommel was made of an onyx-like material, save a silver vein that stood against the darkness. The silver portion of the design formed a cloud which was pierced by an outstretched hand of the same silver-like metal. Within the dark metal, a battle was depicted between 4 warriors, 2 with eyes of crimson jewels, and 2 with diamond eyes, whose features were outlined by the silver metal. The grip had swells that were designed for the hand of a large man. The hilt was barren and cumbersome to handle, leading Drake to suspect that at one time the grip had been wrapped with leather or something of the like. Aside from the lack of an adequate grip, there were no obvious signs of wear or decay on the blade, in spite of it being left in the elements for countless winters. A rustle from the forest snapped his focus from the callus. The sky had grown overcast and the sea of trees appeared all the less inviting. Emery's call lingered within his mind, still distant, but growing as he let his focus slip from off the sword. He could feel his heart grow anxious as he realized what he was meant to do with the blade once he returned to the dragon. He had never intentionally killed anything more than a sewer rat in his short life. The act had not been particularly pleasant then, and he found the prospect of ending Emery's life all the less appetizing. He could flee from the Barren Summit and leave this madness behind. He liked to think of himself as a man of his word, but he did not believe anyone would think less of him if he never entered that accursed mountain again, though that was his fear thinking for him. His experience with Emery's had not been pleasant, but the strange creature had been straightforward, and the dragon had let him out of the abyss. A poor soul Drake would be if he left another in darkness to suffer alone as he had been doomed to do. Rising once more, he pressed the blade to his chest and faced down the vacuous depths of the Barren Summit. Walking under the shadow of the mount, he trekked dismally back up the ash and gravel till the dragon's influence once again took hold of his mind. This time, not to be vanquished. Distantly, Drake found himself wondering how such a titanic creature could have been harmed, let alone bested by a sword constructed to be wielded by a mortal man. As majestic as the weapon was, he doubted that even should the blade pierce Emery's, it would inflict any meaningful damage to the dragon, though it would seem that he would soon witness the might of the blade. As Drake drew closer to the dragon, its influence grew in his mind, casting the callous from his thoughts and speeding him on his way. Soon the scarlet veins re-emerged, and Drake could feel the air thicken. Slipping back into the vast chasm where Emery's lay awaiting, Drake's vision at once returned to normal, and his body lost the vigor that had been urging him onward. Sluggishly, Drake drug his body forward till he came in view of the creature. He could just make out the faint silhouette of the dragon's colossal head against the massive branches of scarlet adorning him like a dreadful crown. Drake's eyes never left the dragon's, but Emery's paid little heed to the boy as he approached. His burning eyes gazed distantly into a dark recess of the chasm, as if unaware of the struggling child. Drake took the blade in both hands, holding it aloft for Emery's to inspect. The creature's eyes shifted to the blade. An emotion akin to hatred flashed into the blazing irises of the dragon. A low and audible rumble resounded within the chasm, causing Drake's heart to skip a beat. Place the blade on the ground. Emery's voice reverberated within the boy's skull, the dragon's ancient tongue resounding off the cavern's walls in perpetuity. Hesitantly, Drake obeyed and rested the blade on the stony ground with a metallic clang. Drake's inquisitive gaze searched for meaning behind the dragon's request, yet his unasked question would remain unanswered. Emery stayed still for so long that Drake began to worry that the dragon was displeased or that something was amiss. Feeling fatigue and hunger gnawing at the edges of his mind, Drake silently hoped he would not be required to exert himself further. He yearned to be on his way, but he dared not provoke the dragon, so he remained quiet, shifting his weight impatiently. After what felt like ages in silence, the young thief grew anxious and could barely stand before the creature's grim visage. Mustering his courage, Drake meekly asked, "Mighty Lord, Imris, I have retrieved the blade. Is it not time?" The dragon's eyes blazed and their full weight set upon the boy. Though his flames remained as cold and unchanging as the stone that imprisoned him, Drake could tell that he had earned the creature's scorn. Suddenly, an agitated voice hissed in his mind and swelled within the void. "Little one, even if you possess the strength to pierce my breastplate and endure the agony that would accompany such a feat, you would not slay me. You might." Imris paused and changed his tact. "Little one, you are far too meek to accomplish the task I have charged you. Without my aid, there is no hope for either of us. There is a way, and since you have entered my domain, I have known that it must be so. However, it does not make it any less difficult." Once more Imris grew silent, though this pause did not linger. "It starts by granting you a name." A faint and fleeting smile appeared on the dragon's snout. "As a show of my gratitude, little one, I offer you a moniker in place of the one you unwittingly surrendered. Such a name would serve you poorly in this endeavor anyhow. The story of the liar and thief known as Drake of Hydria ended when he gave up his name to a forsaken spirit long forgotten by the passengers of time. Should you elect to release this penitent soul, you will do so under the name Cianwen Rise. Be more caring of this new title. It is one of my own construction, and is far greater than the name you gave me. Do you find this amenable?" Drake did not understand the meaning of the dragon's words, but he knew without Imri's aid he would never survive the western wilds. He wasn't too keen on this business of being given a new name, but the dragon seemed pleased with himself, and there was no sense in agitating a doomed soul, so he accepted the dragon's terms. Imri seemed content, but then retorted, "Know this, in future dealings with my kind and those like us, a name holds much power, and power over a name is to have control over the destiny. The ignorance of your countrymen has been a disservice to you in our dealings. With my gifts, you will have the opportunity to learn much, though not all paths of knowledge lead to power, joy, or peace.